Hello, everybody. I apologize for this video being late. My name is Sean. I've been the one that's exchanging emails with you over the last few weeks about change and transformation. And this video is a little bit late, so hopefully you had a chance to watch videos that I recommended to see how the hero's journey plays out on the screen. And hopefully you completed the other assignments, the writing assignments, to see how you are embarked on your own hero's journey and where you might be at in that process. Now, some of you might be wondering why all this focus on story, and I'm going to tell you that. But first, I need to educate you about your brain, because your brain is wired for your survival, not necessarily your thriving. And that becomes an obstacle when we start talking about change and transformation. So I'm going to give you an overview of the brain, and then I'm going to talk to you about one of the biggest areas of change or transformation that I deal with as a clinical psychologist, which is helping people overcome their trauma. And I'm hoping to take the education about the brain and what we've been talking about as story and merge them together so you can see how the story works with our brain in order to help us shift from survival into more thriving mode. So it'll all make sense to you. And then it'll set the stage for our later assignments that I'll have you do in the coming weeks to complete this transformation program. So when we talk about the human brain, we actually have three brains in one. And when all three parts of the brain are working well together, life goes pretty smoothly. When they're not working well together, we have some pretty predictable challenges. Those challenges could be anxiety or depression, sometimes addictions. But whatever it is, it often keeps us stuck. And so I'm going to use a model of the brain that I learned from Dan Siegel's work, but it's the hand model of the brain. So if we look at my hand, the forearm here would be the spine, represent the spine. This fleshy part of my hand right here would represent the first part of our brain that evolved. This part of our brain you can think of as the part of our brain that's most interested in our survival. So everything that we need for survival is going to be mediated by that part of our brain. We call collectively those structures the reptile brain. And from a psychological perspective, the things that I'm interested in that are mediated by that part of the brain are the 5 F's. So we have fight, flight, freeze. Those are survival responses to get you out of danger. Foraging, which pushes us out into the environment to get the things we need, like food and shelter. And then fornication, which just is our sexual urge, so we get genes into the next generation. That's all being driven by the reptile brain. If I fold my thumb in like this becomes the second part of our brain that evolved. Now, these structures evolved in mammals, so you'll sometimes hear the term mammalian brain. These structures may also be referred to as the limbic brain, or these structures sit right in the middle of the brain, so you'll sometimes hear the term midbrain. All three terms, by the way, refer to the same set of structures. These set of structures, by and large, functionally are responsible for relationships, emotions, and memory. Now, if I fold my fingers over like this, so my knuckles, the brain is actually sitting in my skull with knuckles forward. My fingers then, and the outside of my hand here, would represent the most recent part of our brain that evolved, or the most modern part of our brain. Now, this is the part of the brain that we most associate with being human. This is the cortex. And the cortex, by and large, gives rise to language, logic, reason, complex thought. It pulls information from the other parts of the brain and weaves it together as a comprehensive whole that then we interact with. This part of the brain is also the part of the brain that gives rise to that voice that's on inside your head, the one that's always on, it's always commenting, it's always chattering. You can't turn it off even if you wanted to. Now, we tend as human beings to think that that voice is us, and it's not. That causes all sorts of problems. But more importantly, whenever there's a conflict between the more recent part of the brain and the more ancient part of the brain, the more ancient one always wins. So whenever we get stressed or tired or hungry or angry, lonely, what I tell people is we end up flipping our lid. The more advanced part of our brain gets kicked into the back seat. It continues to chatter away, but it's no longer at the controls. The part of the brain that then emerges to grab the controls is our reptile brain. And our reptile brain is all about survival. It's not necessarily about thriving. So why does that matter in terms of change? Well, change by definition, when things are changing, there's a stress that's put on us as a human being. As human beings, we don't like change. As human beings, we're resistant to change because change could mean danger. And so changes, any type of transformation is going to trigger a fight or flight response, fight, flight, or freeze response. So what might that look like? Fight response might be more irritation, irritability, agitation. Flee response might be more anxiety, more worry. And freeze response might be more shutdown or depressed kind of response to change. So those would be signs that our reptile brain has kicked in. Here's where we get to the part of story. So change by definition is going to increase our stress as a human being. We don't like change. We like stability. That means safety, and change means potential danger. But in order to grow, we have to cross over that threshold of change. And the thing that helps us grow through change is if we can integrate our brain so that we can be more psychologically flexible and adaptive. We have access to all three parts of our brain working together as a cohesive unit. This is an integrated state or cohesive state. It turns out that story is a really great way to integrate the brain because story allows us to use the logical side of the brain, a more recent part of our brain. It also allows us to trigger emotional responses in our brain. And putting those two online soothes our reptile brain. Stories also allow us to integrate left to right side of our brain. The left side of our brain, which is very logical and linear, gets to be linked up with the right side of our brain, which is more holistic and emotional. And so storytelling, understanding our story, understanding the different stages of our story, providing ourselves a framework for understanding where we've been, where we are currently, and where we might go in the future, allows us to integrate this part of the brain. So that is why over the last few weeks, I've had you map out successes that you've had in your life, challenges that you faced in your life, heroes and mentors that helped you along the way, so that your brain could get ready for what's to come ahead. And you reviewed Joseph Campbell's The Hero's Journey, and so you kind of understand the cyclical process there. And so when we go forward now, you understand the hardware we're working with. You understand that it's natural for human beings to have this fight, flight, or freeze response to change. But in order to grow, we have to push through that. In PTSD treatment, then, what we do is we help people move. So PTSD, for those who are not familiar, is post-traumatic stress disorder. So that's by definition someone who's faced a stress that they were afraid that they were going to die. Their brain goes immediately into fight, flight, or freeze mode. They have a hard time getting their brain to integrate over time. And so they may still be in fight, flight, or freeze mode for days, weeks, months, years after the traumatic event. One way we help them integrate their brain is to help them tell their story. When they first start to tell their story of the trauma, they have immediate fight, flight, or freeze responses. But as they tell the story in the presence of a compassionate healer, a therapist, or even just a good friend, over time, that reaction gets less and less. It starts to make sense to them that things have happened. And we move from post-traumatic stress, this constant fight or flight mode, into what we call post-traumatic growth. What do you want to do with, or what lessons can you take from this trauma that you experience? We are dealing with a transformation, a change, a challenge that is much less than the stress of a PTSD patient, but we're dealing with the same hardware. So if you understand what's happening there, it'll help you make sense of, as you're approaching this change, again, if you're starting to feel more agitated or irritable, that's a sign that you're in that fight or flight mode, that more of a fight kind of response. If you find yourself being more anxious or worried, that's a sign that you're also in fight flight mode, that flight response. Or if you're shutting down and noticing that you're avoiding certain things and not doing what you should be doing as you get closer to that change, that's a sign that you're in that freeze response. And so the best thing that you can do is pull back a little bit, understand your story, where you're coming from, challenges that you've already overcome, gifts and tools that you've collected along the way, mentors that have helped you along the way, reminding yourself that you've made changes before and that you've overcome obstacles before. And that sets the stage for where we're going to go later. So there you have it. It's an overview of the Triune Brain, the hardware, if you will, that you're dealing with. In the next segment of our course, what I'm going to have you do is to work on the software, upgrading the software and the operating system that is installed in this hardware, so that you can make this change more mindfully as you move into the next phase of your own hero's journey. So thank you very much for your time. Again, I apologize for this video being a little late, and I apologize that you're looking at my home office and studio, which is not the it's not a really studio. It's like the spare bedroom / home office, and so the lighting's not that great. But at least we got this out before Christmas. By the way, happy holidays. I hope you enjoy time with family and friends, and look for the next email coming in the next week or so, where I'll give you an assignment to help you understand the operating system and the program, or your personality, that's overlaid on top of this mind of yours. Thank you very much. Happy holidays. Goodbye.